I'm joined now by composer Dalen Wiest. Dalen, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for bringing this beauty. I want to talk about your first memories of loving music.
Well, that's a big one. Music has been, it's been a part of my life for pretty much my entire life. When I was a kid, my dad used to make my brothers and I mixtapes. I got my first saxophone when I was 8 years old. Back then, my oldest brother played trombone. So naturally, I couldn't play trombone. So I had to look at all the other instruments.
Right.
And it was at one of his middle school concerts that I heard one of the other students. We were all able to go down and kind of look at all the instruments and talk to everybody that played them and kind of figure out. And I felt so drawn to the saxophone that I decided that's what I wanted to do. So I got my first one when I was about 8. I played in the band program in middle school, junior high, high school. Then when I went to college, I ended up majoring in music. And I finished the bachelor's degree, and then I got a master's degree in music, and now I work for the Philharmonic. So it's pretty much been just music.
So at what point did you really get into the composition side?
The more I think about this, the more I think back, the earlier it starts. Things that I just didn't realize until looking back on it.
Right.
Like, when you're a kid and your parents spend hundreds of dollars for you to get a big piece of brass, they want you to use it. They want you to get a return on that investment. So they would say, go up to your room and practice your saxophone, get your book out and play some stuff. So, I'd play the 30-second, 10-second melodies, and then that would get boring, and then I would just start playing whatever I felt like and trying to write it down. But I didn't have a word for that. I didn't know that was composition. I thought that was me just avoiding practicing. Then when I was in high school, I'd kept kind of like a miniature journal of names of pieces I thought, names I thought would be good names for pieces of music if I ever figured out how to write music. By this point, I'd long forgotten about, 10-year-old experimenting.
Right.
Then when I was in college, I started out studying music therapy because I was interested in music and psychology. Psychology was one of my favorite classes in high school. So I tried to find a way to kind of merge those two. And then about halfway through, I realized music therapy was not a career field I wanted to be in. But then some of the faculty started offering lessons in composition. And when I heard that, it kind of all clicked, like a little kind of, like a light bulb went off in my head, and I realized that's something that I've literally always wanted to do and just didn't realize it until this exact moment. So I wrote a few short pieces. I really focused on it for probably the first time ever, just to sit down and just, what do I want a piece of music to sound like that's just for me? So I wrote it, I learned it, I played it for one of the faculty, and he said, great, you want to play it on the recital next week with all the other composition students? So that happened.
Yes.
And then for my last 2 years of college, I took weekly composition lessons along with saxophone lessons. The school also had a collective that was focusing on free improvisation, where we studied the works of John Cage and John Zorn. We studied these improvisers that kind of straddled the line between classical and jazz and noise. And we met once a week, and we just said, sometimes we would say, this is what we're trying to do. And other times we would just say, everybody stop talking and just pick up an instrument. Making art is a form of reacting. Stimulus comes in and creativity comes out. I'm sure everyone would argue with me to some degree, but I'm not entirely sure creativity can exist in a vacuum.
No, I think you're absolutely right. But tell me what that stimuli is that really gets you in a good creative space.
So, was one of my composition teachers always said, we're all dealing with the same 12 notes. We're just trying to find different orders to put them in. And for me, we're all dealing with the same people, with the same planet, with the same access to global culture. And for me, it kind of deals with what aspects of the global culture I'm focusing on. So that turning point you're mentioning, or that clarification point, came from when I really started listening to music outside of the Western European tradition. I started listening to Japanese music, I started listening to African music, I listened to a little bit of Australian Aboriginal music, and I really kind of learned that there's a world outside of what we consider to be our world.
Right.
And I learned that I'm not the only person doing this. There's a whole kind of branch of being a composer. I think most people would call it like intercultural. And really what we're doing is we're just kind of recognizing the fact that there's other music than the Western European music that we all studied in music school, you know, starting in Greece and going up to, well, what's now?
So with all of these different influences, how do you describe your sound? Or do you?
I try to let other people describe my sound for me. Because if I try to describe my sound, I'm going to say something different every other day. But I think a sound is the sound I get, whether I'm improvising or whether other people are playing the music that I've written, the sound that gets, I think is an outgrowth of process.
Interesting.
I would define myself as, I call myself a toolbox composer.
Okay.
Like if you want to build a chair, you take your wood, you take your tools, you build a chair. That's the only way to describe it. What did you do today? I built a chair. Okay. When I'm writing music, I take pitch and rhythm and timbre and instrumentation, and I say, what techniques am I going to use in this piece? What is the goal of this piece, and what are the techniques I use to achieve that goal?
I'm clearly mind blown. So I'm going to ask you to play for us, but before I do, do you know what you're going to play? Do you have a composition floating around up there, or does whatever happens happen?
So I will confess I did prepare for this a little bit. all the best improvisers prepare.
Okay. And what does that look like? What does the preparation for an improvisation look like?
So I kind of view improvisation as kind of composing in real time.
Okay.
Where I guess the goal of an improvisation is to play something that if you listened to it and wrote it down afterwards, with maybe some minimal editing, it could be a piece of music. That's my goal when I improvise. Maybe not everybody would do that when they improvise, but that's my specific goal. So when I'm improvising, I'm thinking about the same things I'm thinking about when I'm writing. I'm thinking about what's the goal of this improvisation? What are some techniques I want to focus on? What's the form I want to have? For me, in a piece of music, music is a time-based art. It takes time. It's not like a painting or this wall where you can just look at it and say, yep, that's it. And you can close your eyes and you can remember it. With a piece of music, if it's 9 minutes long, you have to listen to it for 9 minutes to see all of it.
Right.
So in that regard, form becomes important. Every piece of music I write with, well, most of them start with form, where I kind of plot out, how do I want to arrange the material? Where do I want the high and low points to be? Where do I want areas of high density and texture and things like that? So when I improvise, I do the same thing. I think, what kind of, like if I'm drawing a graph, like where do I want the peaks and valleys to be? What kind of story do I want to tell with this? What kind of environment do I want to put you in that you can tell your own story to it?
Dalen, you are a pleasure. Thank you so much for sitting down with me. Will you do us the honor of playing a little bit?
I would absolutely love to. Thank you for asking.
Thank you.
Arts in Focus on PBS Fort Wayne is funded in part by the Our Foundation and the Community Foundation of Greater Fort Wayne.